Hey folks, hope you all are doing well. I'm Karan Bandal from Econosite, and in this video we'll look at India's EV, electronics and solar manufacturing prospects. Let's start with electric vehicles or EVs. When we look at a global picture, we find that there is a clear exponential growth pattern associated with EVs. Their sales growth tracks along an S-curve. What does that mean? Take a look at this graph. Led by Northern Europe, China and driven by policy, it is taking around 6 years for EVs to go from 1% to 10% of new car sales. That is, let's say 1 out of the 100 new cars sold in 2017 was an EV. Then 6 years later, in 2023, 10 out of the 100 new cars sold are going to be EVs. The next stage is even quicker. In leading countries, it is taking another 6 years for EVs to get to 80% of new car sales. If you follow this trajectory further along, the curve looks like an S, kind of. Therefore, growth in EV sales looks like the trend is tracking along an S curve. Now look at EVs in India. In the passenger vehicle market, 2 and 3 wheelers play a pivotal role. They make up 80% of the total new vehicle sales every year. Also, this market segment is important because India's existing 2 and 3 wheeler fleet stock is massive at 250 million. It makes sense to focus on this market segment. Indian government, through its FAME policy, intends to provide a solid boost to EV sales by 2030, results of which are already visible in the two-wheeler market. Last year, electric two-wheeler sales in India reached a milestone of 1 million. This accounted for 7% of all two-wheeler sales in India. Not far from the 10% mark on that S curve we were talking about. Which means in about 6 odd years from now, given the right policies from the government and proper execution by the private sector, India may see EVs account for 80% of all new two-wheeler sales, roughly by 2030. India now has established EV makers like Ola, Okinawa, Hero, Ampere, Ather, TVS and the list goes on. There are over 50 companies operating in this space. So the conditions seem ripe for India's two-wheeler EV manufacturing to take off. I will make a passing remark on four-wheeler EV sales. Currently, EVs account for about 2% of all four-wheeler sales in India. This market segment is sitting at the very beginning stage of an S-curve. But EV sales here will follow the said aggressive growth path, especially now since US-based Tesla has entered India for its components needs to begin with. Last year, Tesla bought $1 billion worth of components from India and this year aims to double their sourcing. As the EV components ecosystem being built by both domestic and foreign players begins to take root, it will result in lower EV prices and stimulate greater sales in this market segment in the future. We need to talk about the power sector here. As more EVs begin driving around Indian roads, power requirement to charge these EVs will also go up. And the fact that India is projected to grow at 6 to 7% in the medium term also means that the power demand will rise. Where will this new power or electricity come from? India, already battling with air pollution, aims to achieve net zero emissions target by 2070 in part to deal with climate change but also to improve domestic environmental conditions. Therefore, the new electricity generation capacity that India will have to add needs to come from green energy sources like solar, wind, hydropower, etc. And India is planning along those lines. Solar power seems to be one of the key focus areas for the government. India currently has 60 gigawatts of installed solar capacity and has set an ambitious target of installing 280 gigawatts of solar capacity by 2030. The tricky part, however, is that India plans to achieve this aggressive target using locally produced solar panels or modules. See, the world, including India, has been utterly dependent on China for solar energy equipment. India used to import almost 90% of the components from China needed to build a solar power plant in the country. But the tide is turning. India's solar economy seems to be slipping out of China's grip. India's solar module imports from China reduced nearly 80% in the first half of 2023. Import of solar cells, parts and diodes from China also dropped around 71%. Two key policy decisions are driving this turnaround. First, in April 2022, India slapped duties on Chinese solar imports. Second, starting in November 2022, India launched two production linked incentive or PLI schemes to encourage domestic production of solar modules, cells and other relevant components. These schemes are expected to create 48 gigawatts of domestic module manufacturing capacity within just the next 3 years. So India's solar related manufacturing is also set to take off. Finally, electronics sector. India is on the radar of several global electronics giants who are looking to gradually diversify away from China. India is poised to be a major producer of smartphones, laptops, tablets, consumer electronics, strategic electronics, wearables and so on, driven not only by a massive domestic demand but also export potential. India was able to triple its electronics manufacturing capacity in the last 7-8 years. Starting at $30 billion then, India just crossed $100 billion in electronics manufacturing in the country. This is primarily due to the success in mobile manufacturing. Targeting an S-curve like growth in this space also, India's private sector aims to triple domestic electronics manufacturing in the next 3 years and then repeat that in the following 6 years to become a $1 trillion electronics market by 2032. In summary, as India grows, all the aspects of the economy appear to be moving in the right direction. Aided by policy interventions such as production-linked incentive schemes, targeted import duties, government subsidies, etc., we can expect to see more EVs on Indian roads, a massive buildup of domestic electronics manufacturing, and a greener power sector in the coming decade. I hope you found this analysis interesting. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.